What if everything you think you are is just a performance? What if the real you can't be found, not because it's lost, but because it was never fixed to begin with? And if that's true, what exactly have you been chasing all this time? Welcome to Mindful Footsteps, a space for those who are done searching outward and ready to begin looking inward. In today's journey, we'll walk together through the illusions we call identity and begin to uncover something far more freeing than a fixed self. If you find truth in this message, I invite you, with presence, not pressure, to like this video, share it with someone walking their own quiet path, and subscribe for more reflections like this. Let's begin, not with answers, but with awareness. In a world that never stops labeling us, at birth, in school, online, we are told we are someone, a name, a nationality, a gender, a zodiac sign. Each of these labels wraps around us like threads of a costume we never chose, but grew so used to wearing that we forgot it wasn't our skin. But let me ask you something. If every label you've ever received suddenly vanished, would there still be a you left to speak of? And if so, who is that you? Pause for a moment. Reflect on it. You see, in my years walking the silent paths of the monastery, sitting for hours in deep meditation, watching my breath rise and fall like the tide, one truth became more vivid than daylight. The self we cling to, fear for, and fight to define is not real in the way we imagine. This isn't a metaphor. This is the core of our suffering. Let me share a story. A man once came to our monastery, successful, respected, a high-powered attorney in his early 30s. From the outside, he had it all. But he told me, "I don't know who I am anymore." Have you ever felt that way? Like you've been playing a role for so long, you can't remember where the performance ends and the real you begins? I asked him gently. Who are you? Without the briefcase? Without the title on your door? Without even your name? He blinked, then sat in silence. You see, no one had ever asked him that before, just like no one might have asked you. As days passed, he sat with that question. At first, there was fear, then tears, then laughter, and finally, peace. Not because he found a new identity to cling to, but because he realized the old one was never more than a costume. A question for you. So I ask you, not as a monk, but as a fellow traveler on this uncertain road, who are you when no one is looking? If your job disappeared, if your social media vanished, if your memories were lost, would you still exist? Share your thoughts. What do you believe truly defines you? Because sometimes, in asking the question out loud, we begin to unravel the illusion. And once the illusion unravels, we begin to see not a self to be found, but a freedom to be lived. Now let me ask again, are you ready to look beyond the mirror? If you've ever sat alone in the quiet of your own mind and wondered why you still feel unfulfilled, despite all your efforts to grow, achieve, become, then what I'm about to share is for you. Because there's something subtle, almost invisible, that binds us to a suffering we can't name. The Buddha saw it. He taught it. And now you are beginning to sense it too. Let me ask you plainly, if there is no fixed self, if all is changing moment by moment, then why are we so desperate to define ourselves? The answer lies in 3 illusions, 3 traps we fall into every single day without noticing. And these traps are not ancient metaphors. They are here, now, shaping how you think, feel, and suffer. Let's look at them one by one. The first voice you hear each day is not from the world outside, It's from within. That constant narrator, the one that says, "This is me. I've always been this way. These are my wounds. These are my dreams." But what if that voice is not the truth? What if it's just a habit? The Buddha once turned a disciple's question back on him, not answering but asking, "What do you think you are?" In modern terms, psychologist Dan McAdams would call this your narrative identity. A story, a script, something you tell yourself so the chaos makes sense. But is it real? Have you ever misremembered a memory so clearly that you would swear it was fact, only to later learn it never happened the way you thought? What does that say about the stories we tell ourselves? We believe we are kind, yet remember moments of cruelty. We think we are strong, yet flee from confrontation. We say we are consistent, but evolve every year into someone slightly different. So here's the question for you. If your inner story is inconsistent, fragile, and ever-changing, how can it be the foundation of your identity? And more importantly, why are you clinging to it? You've heard this voice too. Once I lose the weight, once I land the job, once I become more spiritual, then I'll finally be who I'm meant to be. But let's slow that down. Who is the one you're trying to become? And why do they always seem just out of reach? You see, we live in a culture that worships self-optimization. Apps track your sleep. Books tell you how to master mornings. Even your downtime is supposed to be productive. But what if the search for a better self is actually what's keeping you from peace? The Buddha taught that suffering is born from craving, and craving the perfect version of you is just another form of thirst, an endless chase. Let me ask you, has all your self-improvement ever brought you to a point where you finally said, "This is enough, I am whole"? Or does the finish line keep moving? If nothing you add to yourself can complete you, maybe it's time to question the premise. Is there really a missing piece? Or have you been taught to believe that wholeness is something you earn? Now, we come to the hardest truth of all. Even when we begin to see the illusion, when the false self begins to crack, we don't rejoice, we tremble. Because letting go feels like dying. If I am not my memories, not my roles, not even my beliefs, then who am I? This fear runs deep. It is why people defend opinions that cause them pain. It is why we stay in titles, relationships, and habits that no longer serve us. The Buddha once reminded a monk, "A name is only a sound." But we invest so much in these sounds, don't we? We turn them into our identity. So let me offer a different metaphor. Clinging to a fixed identity is like gripping a sword by the blade. The tighter you hold, the deeper it cuts. What are you holding on to right now? Even though it hurts? Is it an image of success? An old version of you? A belief about your worth? Whatever it is, I invite you not to reject it in anger, but to gently ask, is this still serving me? These three traps, the narrator in your head, the mirage of the perfect self, and the fear of release, are not flaws. They are learned patterns, human, understandable. But here's the truth. They are not permanent. They are not you. They are habits, and habits can be unlearned. So I ask you now, which of these traps has the strongest hold on your life? Let it be known. Speak it out. Name it. And its power begins to fade. And then, only then, you might begin to sense the silence beneath the story, the spaciousness beyond striving, the peace that lives on the other side of letting go. Because the self is not something to find, it is something to see through. And when you see clearly, What's left is not emptiness, it's freedom. The truth is never far. It's not hidden in scriptures, nor locked behind years of monastic silence. It is here, always present. Yet we miss it. Why? Because we've been trained to look outward, to chase answers, to build identities. But what if seeing clearly isn't about adding more, but unlearning what we thought we knew? The Buddha did not come to give us a new belief system. He came to help us see, truly see. Let us begin. First shift. Pause and name. What arises most of us live like leaves in a storm, tossed around by every thought, emotion, impulse. We feel anger, and it speaks through us before we even know it's there. We feel fear, and our bodies shrink before we understand what we're running from. But there is another way. The Buddha taught, pause, observe, name, not control, not suppress, simply witness. This is anger. This is fear. This is craving. Why does this matter? Because the moment you see clearly, the storm loses its grip. Neuroscience supports this ancient practice. When we label an emotion, the brain shifts activity from the reactive amygdala to the reflective prefrontal cortex. In other words, awareness replaces reactivity. Ask yourself, what emotion has been steering your decisions lately, and what would happen if you simply named it? Try it, even now. Second shift. Embrace not knowing. In a world that praises certainty, it is a radical act to say, I don't know. From a young age, we're rewarded for answers. We build identities on what we know. But what if that need for certainty is another layer of the illusion? Zen teachers ask questions not to be answered, but to be felt. What was your original face before your parents were born? Without thinking, who are you? These are not riddles. They are mirrors. They show us how uncomfortable we are with the unknown. Yet it is in that very space where the mind surrenders its grip that truth is revealed. Can you sit in the space between thoughts, not rush to explain, not define, just be in the not knowing? This is not ignorance. It is openness, spaciousness, freedom. Third shift. You are the camera, not the photograph. Imagine a camera. It captures thousands of images, joy, sorrow, youth, age. But the camera is not any of the photos. It simply witnesses. That is your awareness. Your roles change. Your body ages. Your beliefs evolve. But beneath all of it, you remain the witness. The Buddha once used the metaphor of a chariot. Remove the wheels, the frame, the axle, and where is the chariot? It was never a single thing. It was a collection of parts, functioning together for a time. So too with the self. You are not your thoughts. You are not your pain. You are not your past. You are the field in which it all appears and disappears. And in that realization, there is no need to hold on, no identity to defend, no illusion to protect, only the vast, quiet clarity of seeing. Now ask yourself, what are you clinging to right now that keeps you from simply seeing? And what would happen if, just for this moment, you let it go? The truth is already here, waiting not to be found, but to be noticed. Can you see it now? Imagine a ship, wooden, majestic, time-worn. Piece by piece, every plank is replaced. The sails, the mast, the wheel. After years, not a single original part remains. Now imagine all the old parts were gathered and reassembled into another ship. Here's the riddle. Which is the real ship of Theseus? This isn't just a philosopher's thought experiment. It is the very question you ask every time you wonder who you are. Because like that ship, your body has changed. Your thoughts, your memories, your beliefs, all have shifted. So what remains? Who are you when nothing stays the same? Let's go deeper. The Buddha's answer: continuity without a core. In Buddhist teaching, this question finds its mirror in the doctrine of anatta, non-self. The Buddha did not say there is nothing at your core. He said there is no fixed thing you can call me. Instead, there is process, movement, arising and passing. Just as a flame passes from one candle to the next, we experience continuity, but not permanence. You think, I am the same person I was 10 years ago. But you are not. The thoughts you had, the habits you followed, even the cells in your body, they are gone. And yet, something remains, doesn't it? But what if that something is not a thing, but an illusion created by memory, by desire, by the mind's need for stability? The identity illusion and the mind's clinging modern psychology confirms this. Memory is not a fixed archive, it is a story, rewritten each time it is recalled. Our personality adapts to environment, age, even trauma, and yet we insist on saying, "This is who I am." Why? Because the alternative terrifies us. The idea that we are not solid, not fixed, not someone, but something changing, flowing, empty of essence. But let me ask you, if you could no longer remember your name, would you cease to exist? If every title were stripped away, child, parent, lover, leader, would you disappear? Of course not. And yet, we cling to the idea that those things define us, from paradox to liberation. So, back to the ship. Perhaps both versions are real, and neither is. Perhaps identity is not something to pinpoint, but something to witness. And in that witnessing, something subtle shifts. When you no longer try to be something, you become free to experience everything. You stop asking, "Who am I?" and begin to ask, "What is arising now?" You move from fixing yourself to freeing yourself. Ask yourself now, which parts of your life have changed completely, yet you still call them you? And what would happen if you stopped trying to answer the question of who you are, and instead watched, moment by moment, what you are becoming? This is not loss, it is liberation. Because when there is no fixed self to protect, there is nothing to fear and nothing to prove. Only life, unfolding. Are you ready to sail as the ship of Theseus? Once you begin to see that there is no unchanging self, the next question quietly arises. How then should I live? If I am not who I thought I was, if I am not my story, not my past, not even my body, then how do I move through the world? This is not a question of despair. It is an invitation, a doorway. Because without a fixed identity to defend, a new kind of life becomes possible. Let's explore what it means to live with openness rather than identity. Begin here. Live from presence, not persona. Most of us live through a character we've spent years constructing. We speak from a script. We respond based on expectation. But when the illusion of self loosens, something simpler emerges. Presence, not a role, not an image, but a direct, fresh encounter with each moment. You no longer ask, "What would someone like me do here?" You simply ask, "What is needed now?" That shift alone transforms how we work, love, speak, and serve. Have you noticed how freeing it feels when you're fully in the moment? No comparison, no performance, just presence. That's the beginning of living without a fixed self. Practice letting go of roles. You're not just a parent, not just a professional, not just a seeker. All of these are temporary functions, not permanent identities. Try this. The next time you introduce yourself, pause before you list your title. Ask inwardly, am I reducing myself to a label? There's nothing wrong with roles. They're necessary for communication. But suffering arises when we believe we are the role itself. When you understand that roles arise and fall like waves, you gain freedom. You're no longer limited by what you once were. You're not trapped by past mistakes or chained to old achievements. You become available to life, to change, to now. Let life be the teacher. When the self is no longer the center, you begin to notice something astonishing. Everything becomes a teaching. Traffic becomes patience. Illness becomes humility. Uncertainty becomes trust. Even the smallest moments carry a voice. This too is part of the river. No longer needing life to confirm who you are, you open to what life is offering. And suddenly, nothing is wasted. Nothing is outside the path. From effort to ease. Living without a fixed self doesn't mean you become passive. It means you stop pushing against the current of impermanence. It's the difference between swimming upstream and learning to float. When you no longer need to prove, defend, or solidify an identity, your energy returns to its natural state, flowing. Your actions come from clarity, not clinging. Your choices arise from wisdom, not fear. This is what the Buddha called right action, not just moral behavior, but action that arises naturally from seeing things as they are. A question for you. What part of yourself are you still trying to maintain? What would happen if you allowed that version of you to dissolve just a little? What new freedom might appear in the space it leaves behind? This path is not about becoming someone new. It's about becoming no one, so that you can finally be with everything. Not lost, not broken, just here. Let this moment be enough. That is how we live without a fixed self. That is how we come home. There's a silence underneath all your questions, a stillness beneath the searching. And though you may look far and wide for answers, some part of you already knows the truth. But knowing is not remembering, and forgetting is the default of the conditioned mind. The Buddha did not offer us a new identity to believe in. He did not replace one illusion with another. He simply pointed to what has always been true, but overlooked. You were never lost. You just forgot to stop and look. The mind searches, but awareness waits. Have you ever noticed how relentless the mind becomes when it wants a conclusion? It races, grasps, analyzes. It says, "I'll feel peace when I figure it all out." But awareness is different. It doesn't race. It doesn't argue. It waits. Always present. Always still. What if the very act of searching is the reason you haven't seen it yet? Imagine trying to see your reflection by shaking the water. The more you try, the more distorted the image becomes. But when the water becomes still, the image appears, effortlessly. So too with your true nature. The flame and the candle. The Buddha once compared consciousness to a flame passed from candle to candle. It looks continuous, but no moment is the same. No flame is identical to the last. Likewise, your sense of self, this thread you call me, is not a fixed flame. It is continuity without a core, memory without permanence, presence without boundary. And yet, we forget. Because forgetting allows us to play the roles we've learned. It lets us participate in the drama of becoming. But every now and then, something cuts through. A moment of silence, a breath in the dark, a sunset that halts all thought. And there it is again, what you never lost. The still point. Behind the eyes, think back to who you were 5 years ago. 10. Your thoughts were different. Your habits, your fears, your goals. But wasn't there a sense of I that remained? Not as a personality, but as the one who experienced it all? That silent witness, that still point behind the eyes, has not changed. You cannot see it. You cannot define it, but you know it. And that knowing is not intellectual. It is the feeling of being. Living from what you know, not what you think. This path is not about adopting more ideas. It is about embodying what you already know to be true. When you stop running from the present, the truth meets you where you are. There is no future moment when you will become worthy. No perfect version of you waiting to arrive. Just this breath, just this awareness. That is where freedom lives. So I ask you now, what truth have you always known, but keep forgetting? What would your life look like if you lived as if that truth were real? Right now, would you still chase approval? Would you still fear imperfection? Would you still pretend to be someone when being no one is so much lighter? You already know, you've just forgotten, but you can remember. And in that remembering, you come home. There comes a moment on the path, not dramatic, not loud, when something inside simply lets go. No trumpets, no fireworks, just a quiet recognition. There is nothing to fix, nothing to become, nothing missing. And in that moment, what remains is what was always here. This is not enlightenment as a destination. It is intimacy with what is. It is waking up from the trance of becoming and realizing you were never outside the truth. You are already home. You've looked for yourself in every story, in every mirror, in every achievement and identity. But now, the search turns inward, not as a chase, but as a soft remembering. There is no need to escape your humanity, no need to transcend your experience. The Buddha didn't tell you to fly above life. He taught you how to be fully here, awake, present, free. That is the invitation. To live not as a fixed self, but as a flowing presence. To meet each moment not from who you were, but from what is unfolding now. One last question. If you stopped waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect version of yourself, the perfect understanding, what would open up in your life right now? What would it feel like to simply rest in the mystery without needing to solve it?